Hello, everyone. I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the Marketing and Strategy Group, the Harbinger Group.
And I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications. It is hard to believe, Eileen, we've been doing this for 2 years now. And while we're typically forward thinking, we like to take a moment at the beginning of each year to look back at some of our favorite episodes from the previous year and then to look forward at the end to focus on the coming year. So it's been, I think, a terrific year. I think it's evolved. I think, when we first started off, we said we want to do, just communications, business communications. And I think it's definitely morphed into some of the issues that are really front and center of the day, but also best practices for leaders in business.
It's been a ton of fun and it's definitely evolved for sure. And I'm delighted that we're still doing this. Did you know that the majority of podcasts do not continue after their second year? Did you know
Really,
that?
so here we are. Here we are.
I
We're
know.
we're we're showing a showing our ability to keep it going.
It's a marker
And
of
sometimes it's hard though. I mean, listen, it's not,
persistence.
and listen, nobody's going to say, "Oh gosh, poor Rob and Eileen," but when you're running companies and having full-time jobs and trying to attend to clients, it's sometimes difficult to find that time, but it's so important and it's so fun. And I just enjoy working with you so much, but also enjoy sharing information with our listeners.
Me too. And I've enjoyed their feedback.
Yes.
Encouragement to go in different directions. And also, when we share a lot about ourselves and our personal journeys, a lot of our listeners appreciate that and share their own stories. And that's been very rewarding. But the prioritizing of doing this, which is, it's a form of marketing, if you will.
Sure.
It's funny because that's what we're always telling our clients, particularly the CEOs and C-suite leaders, that, yeah, it's really hard to make the time to do this. And it might feel like um, something that isn't as important as the running of their companies. But the putting forth of your uh, personal brand, in service of your company brand is, in my opinion, some of the most valuable time that you can spend, because it fosters trust and credibility and a lot of the things that we talk about all the time. So good on us for being persistent and continuing to
Backslap, backslap, backslap.
do the things. And, good on every CEO who continues to do the same and every thought leader in business, because I certainly appreciate reading all of their thinking and hearing all of their guidance and learning from their experiences too. So that's a great thing. But what if we take a little walk down memory lane over the past year, review
Sure.
some of our favorite episodes, and just pull out some of the advice that we gave, best practices that we shared, resources along the way so that people can remember, oh, I missed that episode, or, oh, yeah, that was a great one. I'll listen to that again. Let's
I
do
love the,
that.
I love the people. There's not a lot of them, but I love the people that are like, I listen to every episode. I'm like, God bless you. If you could
It's true.
invite
You mean
50
like
of your friends, we'd
my
be so much
sister?
better.
No, there's quite a few. So I'll start. I truly involved. This is episode 27. The Next Generation Workforce Speaks Out. It's the second year that we have done this. I think it's a tradition we will continue having younger folks, interns who work with us, come on the show and talk to us about what's important to them. Some of the things this year that were new for, compared to the prior year, they are even more so, I sensed, really focused on working in a place that fosters mutual respect. And that takes on a bunch of different forms, but that was the theme that I pulled out. I went back and listened to some, and also shout out to the people who help us produce the show. I had a
Absolutely.
big assist from several of those team members too in this recap. So I want to just say thank you to them for everything that they do. But mutual respect, opportunities for growth, that was another key theme. And the continuation of the desiring of hybrid or honestly all remote opportunities was discussed greatly. And that's interesting because, not that we're going off on a tangent here, but I have been reading quite a bit about return to office going full speed ahead at many, many, many major companies,
Hmm.
some even insisting now on as many as 5 days a week. back on corporate campuses. So that's interesting. We'll see where all that's going to go in the next couple of years.
And I know one bank in particular wants everybody back 5 days a week. And they also have all this technology now to track everything they do. Every time you click on anything on your computer, every time you're away from your desk, every time. And it's like, that's a little creepy. I think that's a little much, but they can't do that when you're working remotely. And so I was reading this article about it, and we are kind of getting off on a tangent here, but I will say that's, return to office has been a big issue in both the years that we have done this, because it's a thing and people are concerned about it. And some people don't want to go back to the way it was, and some people are insisting on it. And
you just have to wonder, particularly the upcoming workforce, this new generation, they just went through some high school years and college years where that's all they had was online courses. If you're kind of forged in that fire, how will you adapt, or do you want to? And I just wonder, are they going to be choosing employers more so, or just starting their own companies, that are alternative in how they conduct business? I kind of expect that that's where it's going to go. We'll see, but that's not what our show is about today. I'll highlight a couple more really fun things that the next generation workforce told us when they were on our show that I thought were important. The continuation of emphasizing cultural diversity and inclusivity. That's not going to go away. More so, I hear people looking at websites of companies they're considering working at, and kind of looking at headshots and things and saying, boy, that's a heavily white or even heavily male and white organization. Do I feel right there? Do I want to be there? So
take a look at the bios.
Lots of things for us all to think about. Yeah.
But you know what I liked about it? Even last year and this past year, the episode you're talking about, the next generation workforce speaking out, having your Harbinger Group folks on, the young ones, and expressing it, it always, first of all, it always does very well in terms of listeners. People really seem to like to hear about that. And they really bring up some important issues about the workplace and about what they want. And they're in a position to say, hey, this is what I want. And they're going to be able to go out and get it. And I'll also say something as it relates to it about the next generation workforce. I was just reading an article today about one of the hockey coaches in the NHL playoffs and how he changed his management style a couple of years ago from screaming and yelling at people because he had so many millennials and Gen Zers in his locker room that all of a sudden it had to be a little bit nicer. It had to be a little bit more collaborative. You could yell, but it had to be constructive. You can't just go tear somebody down. You had to build them up. And I think that is so important for us to remember about the workforce now. It's changing right before our eyes. And that whole idea of a boss, of a coach, essentially a CEO getting it, all the CEOs that are going to be successful are going to have to get that. And the ones that don't are going to be left behind. Yeah.
We all have to continue to evolve, adapt. Yeah. That's how you stay fresh anyway, people.
Absolutely.
Don't just be stuck in the mud doing the same old.
Leave that comfort zone just a little bit. So a little bit related, but one of the favorites that I had from the fall was episode 33. Are our employees still calling the shots? So we were talking about it as leading up to it, that the labor market was tightening up as it is right now.
Yeah.
The power that employees were wielding post-pandemic relative to remote working, the great resignation and quiet quitting might be waning. But Shay Lovett with Insperity, which does outsourced HR, said employees were absolutely calling the shots still, which I found fascinating because here we have a labor market that was doing well and that there were more jobs than there were people. And then all of a sudden things soften up a little bit on the economy. And all of a sudden you're thinking, well, they can't be dictating terms, remote work, this, that, whatever. And she was like, yes, they are.
Oh, yeah.
And they're able to still. And so my takeaway from that, Eileen, was that even though when the economy's good, when the economy's not so good, the job, the labor market, et cetera, that one of the creations of the pandemic was that these employees, especially these younger ones that you were just referring to, are able to call their shots a little bit more and say, this is what I want. And employers are having to react to it or stay ahead of it.
Yep, healthy work balance or work-life balance, 100% is where I see, and I heard Shay back us on this, that they're not going to budge on that. They're going to be far more insistent that they require flexibility, whether it be for childcare needs, drop off, pickup. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different ways that they need more flexibility in terms of when and where work gets done, which does raise that question about returning to office 5 days a week in major corporations. Some people will just do what they have to do to remain employed in places like that. I believe some will tough it out to get the credential and they'll move on. But the insistence on healthy work-life balance amongst millennials in particular is going to be very strong, and we're going to have to keep living with that. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the world. We're all in a place where, particularly for the next, few years, everybody's healing from a lot of bad stuff. So
Absolutely.
let's give a little. That's what I say.
I want to talk about the office thing a little bit later. That's one of the episodes that I wanted to focus on, and I do have a question for you related to that. So let's table that for a little bit later, because I do want to ask you, as a business owner with multiple employees, what your thoughts are.
Of course, no problem. Around the holidays, we did that great Take Stock episode where we talked about, the coming together of our personal and professional lives and how expressing gratitude at work is healthy for everybody, particularly now after we've all been through a whole bunch of stuff and a lot of people are, seeking to heal. I enjoyed that episode very, very much. We talked about, and this will be in our show notes, a lot of this recap, the 5 good ways to show gratitude at work, like our handwritten notes that are just, for small things or big things. Using a vision board to incorporate our gratitude, practicing, shifting of our perspectives so that we're sharing with employees the positive, even when things went bad. Hey, this is what went really well, but you start there and then maybe move on to, this didn't go so great, but it softens the blow. Those are nice ways to express gratitude first, I think was the way that we put it on the show. Mm-hmm. And just remembering to do it, like the time for not being grateful at work in your professional life is over. It used to be that it was like, oh, it was extra nice when you were, but now I think it's a table stake, and everybody should be living with gratitude more at work. And that was a fun little walk down memory lane for our gratitude at work episode.
Yeah. And I remember you said, I want to do something on this. This was your idea. And I was so encouraged, because here you are, a CEO of a marketing and strategy firm, and you're always pulled in 30 different directions because you're trying to stay on top of all the work for the clients and making sure everybody's on task. And you're like, I do want to, take a deep breath, take a step back, and smell the proverbial roses and remember why I'm grateful. And I think that's a great reset for not just you, but for everybody. And so I was so happy that you wanted to do it. And I was also happy because I've worked in toxic work environments before. And especially as I've started my communications firm, the clients I work with are largely very collaborative, very supportive. They run, a lot more of them run their companies like you do than the whole, do as I say, not as I do, work harder, blah, blah, blah. And we're kind of, that's a common theme throughout this particular episode, because that's how you motivate people. And that's what people need. And that's what they're searching for. And so to give it to people authentically is huge. And so I'm glad that we talked about it. And I'm glad that we made it an episode, expressing gratitude at work, because some people might be like, why do you express gratitude? You're supposed to do your job. Just go in and do your job and go home.
Right.
It's like, but it's more than that. You can do that, and then you can be average. Or if you do the little things, you're going to be exemplary.
Well said. Okay. Well, if you're looking for some motivation on that topic, you can go back and listen to episode 35, Expressing Gratitude at Work.
Perfect. Well, there was a couple in the fall, and this is where I wanted to refer to certain things with you. 30 and 31. 30 was, we are never returning to the office full time, which back in the fall felt like, oh, that's for sure. And now, as we're sitting here talking today, it feels like, well, maybe that's not the way it's going to be. But I read Cranes, and they always keep track of what the 50% are back in the office. So they're always keeping track of the percentages of Chicago businesses back in the office. And then 31 is, can't we all get along in the office? So those were back to back ones. And I like them because I really don't, despite the fact that there are people now pushing, and it's years later, right? It's years past when, first like, oh, you don't have to come back to the office if you don't want to. Now it's, we want you to come back 3 days a week. Now, as you mentioned earlier, they're pushing for 5 days a week. I still think the hybrid work thing is going to be the one that's going to win the day, just because people have gotten used to the rhythm of that. And also, you realize how much time you're wasting. Especially, I live in the northwest suburbs. I take the train when I have to go in to the city, but like driving through the Kennedy construction now, I mean, just the people that do that, is just bumper to bumper all day long, day long. How many hours are you wasting doing that so just from that, and that's a very simplistic view of it, but it's certainly the commute, the convenience, things of that nature, which is what we talked about. Those are still issues to this day. And then as it related to getting along at the office, we were trying to help people brush off their interpersonal skills, because, you're working remotely, you're working through Zoom and various other virtual meeting platforms. And all of a sudden you're in person again. How do you do? And I've seen some of my clients who have returned to the office just 3 days a week. And the whole interpersonal thing is a challenge, can be a challenge.
It can be. Yeah. As we discussed on that show, we forgot a lot of niceties and social small talk skills over the years. So, not to mention that we just don't realize the impact psychologically of not being around people as much. The impact on a lot of us is far greater than we think. So when we're getting in those situations, it can be super taxing to spend that much time interacting with human beings. So, remembering that that's still the case now, even though we did that episode back in the fall. I saw it this weekend when my daughter graduated from high school. The girls,
I saw the pictures.
Resilient.
Congratulations. That's awesome. What a moment.
It was huge. So she went to an all-girls high school, and they were just, obviously they're in school together all day. And so are the teachers, but a lot of us are still working remotely. So many of the adults were just so tired. And all the kids, they closed down State Street outside of Holy Name Cathedral, and they did the graduation cap toss, and the Chicago police were out there for a good 45 minutes after the ceremony to let the kids and families just basically celebrate on the street, which is really special. But you could just see the difference of course, they're much, much younger than us, and that plays a big role. But they just didn't have the social fatigue onset that a lot of us seem to have. So it was interesting. Good thing for us to remember even now.
And we're a lot older, and we're also kind of caught in our ways a little bit too. So that might explain some of it as
Definitely.
well. Why are they 18 and they have so much energy and they never seem tired, and they're, because they're 18.
That's right.
I know as the father of an 18-year-old as well, that it's just a different world. They just have endless energy.
They do. So let's recap a few more fun episodes that we want to make sure people check out if they haven't. We did something really cool around the start of this year. We started off with focusing on communications core competencies. And that meant we created a series of 3 podcasts, and they were designed to address the concept of, is your internal house in order when it comes to being able to communicate effectively? So the first was, is your internal house in order? Are your spokespeople media ready? Was the second. And the third was communicating clearly during a crisis. That episode featured second time show guest Harlan Loeb of Argyle Communications. All 3 of those. It's a really nice package. If you didn't listen to them, I strongly suggest that you go back. The internal house in order I think was one of my favorites because it's just like, we're kind of going back to business as usual or pre-pandemic days. And we got a little dusty and rusty in some areas. I just had noticed working with some of our clients, like, oh, wait, no, we have to go make sure that all our packages of information are primetime ready in different ways, or that our spokespeople can go on camera again, or even go in studio, things that just hadn't been happening for a while, right?
Nope.
Yeah. And what did we need to do to get ready for doing that? It was a good chat. I particularly are your spokespeople media ready? I think you should go give that a listen if you haven't before. The concept of being knowledgeable and accessible, making sure that your spokespeople have done a media training recently. If they haven't, you've got, revisiting those basic principles this year is a good idea. Things are going to continue to increase public speaking opportunities. Conferences and events are in full swing. Let's just, go back in and make sure they've got the stuff to make you and your company look great when they're out there speaking on behalf of your organization.
And as it relates to the spokespeople being media ready, I think, when you sit there and you say, are they ready? But it also means, as when I work with clients, I know when you do too, you sit there and I'll put it in a nice way. We put them through their paces. And hopefully the experience they have with us is far more taxing than it is when they actually do it. So I hope that when they get through with an interview that may be contentious, or maybe it's not, and they're like, oh my gosh, that was so much easier. And the reason is because hopefully we asked you harder questions and we challenged you to do that. And then communicating clearly during a crisis. Harlan was on episode 2 right when we started this thing. He was on episode 40. We're like, is he on too much? I'm like, no, I think every 38 episodes we have Harlan on. He is so knowledgeable. He is so interesting. And his depth and breadth of knowledge when it comes to crisis communications is incredible. So just having him on the show and really going high level with crisis communications as it related to Norfolk Southern, the awful spill that they had back in February in Ohio. So we kind of drafted off. Yeah, of course. We kind of drafted off that and brought up some interesting points, I think. And Harlan is fantastic. And I know you all go way back, but having him on the show, I think we can commit to like every 38 episodes or so. We got to have Harlan on.
I agree. In particular, Harlan reinforced something that everybody should remember, that if you don't have a rapid response team in place and you're a major organization that has any range of potential risk factors in place because of what you produce, what you do, who you work with, yada, 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 you need to have one. So get that tended to this year was a key takeaway guidance from that show. And that you need outside counsel to be leading your crisis response, someone who is not a member of the executive leadership team.
Absolutely.
And also leads back to preparing your spokespeople, because if your CEO really can't cut it, you don't put them in front of a situation like that.
Absolutely not. And the other thing about that too, and then I know we're going to move on, but the whole thing with Harlan is the things that he's bringing up so important with the rapid response team. But I know that sometimes I deal with clients, and I'm sure you have as well, where you're like, you really need a rapid response team. And they're thinking, well, gosh, what's that going to cost? And we need to have a plan, not only a rapid response team, but a plan where everybody's aligned so that the rapid response team can rapidly respond. And you know what, that's money that you have to spend up front. And I'm always trying to make the case, do you really want to spend it on the back end when you're 6 or 8 hours behind because you're not ready to go? Oh, well, I'll hire you then. I'm like, you're going to hire me then, and I'm going to be now 8 to 12 hours behind.
Yeah. And maybe I don't want the job then, because it's a no-win situation.
You're gonna be like, man, you don't know what you're doing. I'm like, well, no, I really know what I'm doing when I'm properly aligned, and that's the point of that. So we don't need to belabor that, but that's an important point, I think, to raise as well. So this was fantastic. You were pushing for it. You and I had, I think, started really zeroing in on artificial intelligence as it relates to chatbots. Right around the same time, I was trying them on for size. I know you had folks at the Harbinger group trying it on for size too. And we did episode 41 and 42 were back to back about AI. And the first one was, is AI the future of content creation? And the second one was, and you happened to be on vacation, so I got to spend an hour with your really bright and incredible marketing team, several of them. The Harbinger group marketers put AI to the test. So it was very fun, lightning episodes. So great to hear what they had to say, and to know that you have been putting them through the paces, and you're saying, hey, check out Chat GPT, check out Bard, check out Bing, whatever the chatbot AI is. And they really had some interesting insights.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say one thing about this. It's both of those episodes are well worth a listen if you want to just kind of get up to speed in this space. But gosh, it was days after we released, I think, the second show on the topic. Huge things happened. The entire industry issues a letter signed by nearly 200 people in the industry. Alarm bells all over the place that this needs to be dialed back. This needs to be thoughtfully considered. There are imminent dangers baked in. And we had been talking about that in the very first episode to some depth. So it was reassuring to a degree to see that development in the industry. I don't really see that a ton has happened coming out of those alarm bells. So that's something we will definitely keep an eye on. Also, a huge executive from Google resigned.
Yes, that was right around that time as well.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's right to be cautious. It's right to keep an eye on it. So, if you want to learn more, please go back and have a listen to those episodes as well.
Yeah.
So here we come to a close. It's been a wild second year. We're moving into our third, and their very first episode that we will be releasing as part of our year 3 content is communications priorities for CEOs. We're going to be delving into that in some depth, and we're excited for that to kick off our third year. So thanks for being my co-host.
Oh my gosh, back at you. For the communications for that particular episode, the priorities for the CEOs. It's also delivering it with empathy and authenticity and things that we talked about at the very beginning of this episode about the ways that communication needs to happen in this day and age.
Yeah. So that'll be a fun one. All right, everybody. Thanks for being our listeners.
Well, listen, that's going to do it for another episode of Can You Hear Me? Our second year anniversary special. I'm Rob Johnson.
And I'm Eileen Rochford. Thanks again for listening. And remember, you can find Can You Hear Me wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more.